sequel to the story of the ant and the caterpillar, titled The Rescue of the Butterflies. It was a beautiful spring day in May. Princess Molly was very happy and excited. She was going to meet her good friend Sanga, who lived further down the river. Sanga rarely left the orchard where she lived, being a very, very rare butterfly. She knew that there was always the chance of being caught by a collector. Sanga was a brilliant colour of blue with purple and violet streaks throughout her wings. She was about half the size of her friend, who was a monarch butterfly. Molly waited and the sun got warmer, drying the dewdrops on her wings. She opened her wings and began to sing her song.
Here we go, to and fro, up in the sky and away we go.
A light breeze was following Molly, so she started to glide, staying very alert. She scanned her surroundings, watching for hawks who might gobble her up. On she went, flying and gliding, and as she turned the bend in the river, she spotted the brilliant blue colour. It was her friend, sitting on a piece of driftwood down by the water's edge. Her friend saw her and flapped her wings in excitement. Molly glided down and landed beside her. They were so happy to see each other. They passed the time away, exchanging news and stories about things that had happened since the last time they had met. Sanga told Molly about an evil collector who kidnapped rare butterflies and kept them in a shed where he bred them, selling the young ones to other collectors. A blue heron landed close to them. They watched the big bird just in case it might decide to gobble them up. Suddenly, there was a great swishing sound. A butterfly net had engulfed the two friends. The evil collector had crept up and surprised them. Molly could see the long, spindly fingers of the evil one probing. He caught Molly and pulled her out, and seeing her, he said, "You're not a rare one," and tossed her aside. Terrified, she flew up into a tree. She could see Sanga calling for help, but there was nothing she could do. The evil one caught Sanga and put her in a jar. Molly was so angry that they had not been more aware of their surroundings and had allowed him to creep up on them and trap them so easily. She realized it was not a time to be angry. She had to stay cool and follow him to his house. Molly followed the evil one through the woods, flitting from tree to tree, keeping out of sight. Soon they emerged into a field, and on the other side, nestled in a grove of trees, was a house and a garden shed. This must be his home, thought Molly. She watched the evil one cross the field and go straight to the shed. He opened the door and went inside. Molly flew across the field and landed on a lilac tree beside the shed. A short time later, the door opened and out came the evil one, rubbing his hands together and sneering. He disappeared into the house. Molly waited a few minutes, then she flew down and landed on the windowsill. Peering through the window, she was shocked at what she saw. There was a long table in the center of the shed, and on it were small cardboard boxes with plastic tops. She counted 20 of them. She flew back up into the lilac tree and started to think of a way to get Sanga and the rest of the butterflies out of the shed. Then one word jumped into her head. Jimmy Jump. Molly would go and find Jimmy Jump. The tiny, brave black ant would know what to do. When she arrived at his home, she started to call out, Jimmy Jump, I need your help. Where are you? I'm here, Princess. You sound very upset. What happened? So Molly told him the story of what had happened. First of all, I'm going to tell my mother what has happened and that I'm going with you to help free the butterflies, Jimmy Jum declared. Jimmy Jum disappeared, and when he returned, he said, "Let's get going. We have to come up with a plan of rescue." He climbed up onto Molly's back, and as she rose, she began to sing.
Here we go, to and fro, up in the sky and away we go.
They had been flying for some time and were getting close to the destination when suddenly Jimmy Jum shouted, "Molly, there's a big hawk sitting on that dead tree up ahead. Oops, he's flying towards us. Dive, Molly, dive, dive." Molly closed her wings and dropped out of the sky like a stone, landing among a bunch of cattails near the river. The hawk circled above them, then flew back and perched on the dead tree. They would have to wait until the morning and escape in the early dawn. They woke the next morning at the break of dawn. An orange glow washed over the eastern skies. It would soon be time to make their escape. Jimmy Jum climbed up the stalk of a cattail to look and see if the hawk was still around, and there it was, still perched in the dead tree. His head was tucked under his wing. He was asleep. They discussed two plans. The first was to fly low and hope the big bird stayed asleep. The second was to jump onto some driftwood and float down the river. They chose the second plan as they felt it was safer than flying. The sky was getting brighter, making it easier to see drifting on the river. It was not long before they saw a large brush pile. It was not too far out. Molly cried out, "Climb on, Jimmy, it's now or never." She took off flying as fast as she had ever flown in her life. They soon reached the brush pile and landed. The sun was now creeping up into the eastern sky. Molly looked up at the dead tree. The hawk was now awake. They had made the right decision. They cheered quietly. Off they went, the current taking them out into the middle of the river. As soon as they were around the bend, they took to the sky. They followed the shoreline for a short time, and then they flew in among some trees for safety. Eventually the landscape changed, and they found themselves over sparsely covered fields. Molly flew higher up. It was then she spotted the place where the evil one had kidnapped Sanga. "We're here, Jimmy Jum. Hold on, we're going down." They landed safely on some piece of dry wood where Molly and Sanga had been. Jimmy Jum stood up on the driftwood, looking off into the distance. Molly could tell he was in deep thought. After a few minutes, he turned to Molly and said, "I have a plan to free the butterflies." Molly perked up. "What's the plan?" she asked. Jimmy Jum replied, "It's a bit complicated, but first I must go and find a colony of ants, and when I do, I will reveal my plan to you. I must leave now, so I want you to stay in the trees until I return." He then disappeared into the long grass and was gone. "Good luck, Jimmy Jum. Stay safe." She then flew up into the canopy and hid among the leaves. The brave little ant travelled far, scouring all the likely places where you would find ants. Looking under big stones, climbing up trees, looking in old woodpecker holes and into old hollow logs. He did not find any ants and was starting to worry, because if his plan was going to work, he needed the help of as many ants as he could get. Tired and hungry, he struggled on. Then he came to a small clearing. Peering through the long grass, he could not believe his eyes. There was a large ant hill, probably home to a large colony of ferocious fire ants. Jimmy Jum knew that these ants had a bad reputation, and they would attack other ants and insects that came near their home. He could see a big fire ant standing guard at one of the entrances. As scared as he was, he had no other options. He had to ask for help. Taking a deep breath, He strode out into the clearing and shouted, "Hello, hello, my name is Jimmy Jump and I need your help." The big fire ant was startled by the appearance of a tiny black ant. "Halt! Do not come any closer. Your kind are not welcome here," he said. "I mean you no harm, and I really need your help. Are you the king?" asked Jimmy Jump. The big ant paused for a moment. It was obvious he was honored for being taken as a king. "No, I am not the king. My name is Gruffy. I am the captain of the guards. We do not have a king here, but we do have a queen. Do you think I could just speak to your queen and explain my situation?" Gruffy paused for a moment. "Just stay where you are," replied Gruffy, who then turned and walked towards the entrance, muttering to himself. A short time passed when suddenly a group of big, ferocious fire ants marched over and surrounded Jimmy Jump. They started to make grunting sounds as they circled him. Although he was a bit scared, he stood his ground and stared into their big eyes. He was ready for anything. Suddenly, after Gruffy signaled Jimmy Jump to follow him, when he got to the entrance, 3 ants formed on each side of him. Gruffy led him down a dark tunnel. They emerged into a large hall, and there, seated on a white stone throne, was the Queen. Jimmy Jump bowed out of respect and thanked the Queen for the opportunity to speak with her. "Out of respect, I welcome you to this colony of fire ants. You are the only black ant or any other type of ant that has ever been in my chamber. Fire ants do not like black ants, but Captain Gruffy informs me you are in trouble and that you need our help. As Queen of this colony, I cannot turn away another ant who needs help. We have a loose code of conduct, so we'll not ignore those who are in danger." "Thank you, Your Majesty," replied Jimmy Jump. He then began to tell his story. He could see the Queen was becoming quite concerned. When he finished, he then went on to tell the Queen that this evil one was very dangerous to all insects and felt strongly that if he ever discovered their colony, he would destroy it. "We have to drive this sinister and evil person out of the country, Your Majesty. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you," said Jimmy Jump. The Queen was obviously very impressed by the black ant and asked, "How can I help you?" "I will need 100 of your best soldiers and Captain Gruffy to lead them," replied Jimmy Jump. Pausing to consult with her advisors, the Queen eventually replied, "The Council has granted your request. It is now time for you to return to your friend and give her the good news." Jimmy Jump thanked the Queen and Captain Gruffy. He then walked back up through the tunnel and outside, quickly disappearing into the long grass. He felt very proud of himself and what he had accomplished. Bearing a great responsibility for the freedom of all the captive butterflies, Jimmy Jump paid special attention to his surroundings as he made his way safely back to Molly. The journey was uneventful, and he arrived back at the river the next morning. "Molly, I'm back!" shouted Jimmy Jump. In a vigorous flapping of wings, Molly was at his side. "I'm so happy to see you," said Molly. "I've been so worried since you left. Did you have any success?" Molly listened to his story, and when he finished, she told him how proud she was for being so brave. "So now that you are back, what are your plans? Are we going to leave now and go back to the fire ants?" Jimmy Jump sensed Molly was very worried about Senga. "As soon as I get something to eat and some rest, we will leave to begin the rescue of the butterflies." After Jimmy Jump had eaten, he climbed up onto Molly's back and they flew off up into the canopy. The brave ant was already asleep. Molly closed her eyes. Tomorrow was going to be the start of a great adventure. She also knew it was going to be very, very dangerous. Feathered streaks of red and orange were beginning to dance up into the dark eastern sky. Molly and Jimmy Jum were awake. A quiet nervousness hung over them. The pair of heroes sat, each engulfed on their own thoughts, contemplating the dangers that lay ahead. In a sudden burst of energy, the sun charged up into the sky. The pair looked at each other. The day of reckoning was upon them. It was time to go. With Jimmy Jum safely on her back, Molly dropped out of the canopy and weaved her way through the forest. They arrived at the ant colony late in the afternoon, landing just beside the long grass. A new sentry stood at the entrance of the colony. As soon as he saw Molly and Jimmy Jum, he came towards them. "I've been expecting you. Wait here. I will inform Captain Gruffy and the Queen of your arrival." He then turned and disappeared through the entranceway. Captain Gruffy soon appeared. It was gone obvious he was happy to see Jimmy Jum. Turning to Molly, the captain introduced himself and informed her that the Queen was coming out to meet her. They waited for her to arrive, and they waited and waited and waited. "You cannot rush royalty," said Gruffy. The royal guards appeared at the entrance, followed by 6 soldier ants carrying the Queen on a beautiful wooden throne. They lowered her to the ground and stood on guard behind her. As a sign of respect for the Queen, Princess Molly opened her wings and laid them flat on the ground. The Queen was very impressed with the display of manners and show of respect. They spoke privately for a short time, and when they finished, the Queen said farewell to Molly and returned to the colony. Captain Gruffy turned to Jimmy Jum and said, "Thank you for requesting to the Queen that I should lead the soldiers in our quest to free the captive butterflies." Jimmy Jum, Captain Gruffy, and Molly huddled together to discuss the escape plan. And when they were finished, Gruffy assembled his soldiers and explained the plan to them. Molly would fly ahead and keep watch on Evil One's movements. The soldiers would leave the colony in groups of 25. Jimmy Jum would lead group number 1. Gruffy would bring the last group. They would all meet at a large flat stone close to the garden shed. There they would wait where Jimmy Jum would meet the captain, Gruffy, and lay out the final plan to rescue the butterflies. The next morning, Molly said to the group and flew off on her mission. The soldiers would follow, singing their song. "Left, right, forward we go. Left, right, and we're ready to fight. Marching under the clear blue skies to rescue the captive butterfly." Everyone arrived safely at the big stone early that afternoon. The soldiers remained hidden in the long grass. Jimmy Jum went on ahead to scout the door and make sure there was lots of room at the bottom for the soldiers to enter the shed. It was agreed that Captain Gruffy would have complete control of his soldiers when he entered the building. Jimmy Jum unfolded the final plan to Gruffy and Molly. The fire ants are to advance in groups of 10. Once inside, they will climb up onto the table. Captain Gruffy will then assign 5 soldiers to each box. They will begin to open an escape hole in each one. The final 10 soldiers will remain at the bottom of the door to assist the butterflies escape. Molly reported that the evil one had gone into the shed only once since they had arrived. He probably would only make one more visit in the evening. The sun slowly disappeared in the western sky. Darkness was soon upon them. Tree frogs would be heard singing a melody in the nearby trees. An owl could be heard. Its melancholy sound brought an eerie feeling that settled over the group. Tension started to rise as the hour of rescue was fast approaching. Would the plan work? Captain Gruffy called the soldiers together and went over the plans once more. He finished by saying, "Are you ready?" The soldiers replied, "Aye, we're ready." Everyone settled down to await the Evil One's final check. The moon sailed up into the night sky, giving everyone ample light to perform their duties. The fireflies were dancing all around, helping to break the tension of waiting for the evildoer to return, hopefully being his last check of the captive butterflies. The night was so still, not even a breath of wind stirred to ruffle the leaves on the trees. Suddenly, the squeaking of rusty hinges on the door signaled the Evil One was coming out. The door opened wide, and there he stood in the doorway. Light from the house flooded the pathway, casting a long shadow. He started to mumble as he walked to the shed. The fireflies scattered in all directions. The Evil One stepped to the shed and produced a key from his pocket. A loud click of the lock and the door opened. He quickly went inside and closed the door, just in case any of the butterflies had escaped. A sliver of light escaped through the window and lit up the big stone where the soldiers were hiding. Little did the Evil One know that the soldier ants who were there were going to try and rescue the butterflies, bringing an end to his evil ways. He was there for a long time, bringing Jimmy Jum to tell Molly that this was a good sign. This would be his last visit with his captors. The light went out in the shed. The door opened and out came the Evil One. Turning, he took the key and locked the door. Still mumbling to himself, he shuffled off towards the house. He opened the door, stepped inside, and locked the door. The fireflies flew off, and the tree frogs and owl fell silent. A nervous quietness engulfed the area. The final wait had begun. Molly, Captain Gruffy, and Jimmy Jum gathered at the big stone and revealed the final plans for the rescue, ensuring each one knew their duty. Captain Gruffy then took the first watch, hoping the lights in the house would soon go out, but they stayed on. Time dragged on and on. Jimmy Jum relieved Captain Gruffy and took over the second watch. Molly was catching some sleep. Captain Gruffy returned to his soldiers to rest. Jimmy Jum paced back and forth under the lilac tree, wondering if the lights would ever go out, signaling the Evil One had gone to bed. The night dragged on and on. Jimmy Jum was getting worried. Would there be enough time to complete the rescue? A call from a single coyote shattered the silence, and at the same time the lights went out in the house. Jimmy Jum called Molly and Captain Gruffy to tell them the good news. Now they would have to wait and make sure the Evil One was asleep. The soldier ants formed groups of 10. All they needed now was the captain's order to begin the advance on the shed. It was time for Jimmy Jum to make a final check and alert the butterflies that the rescue was about to begin. Jimmy Jum came running back. Molly, we have a serious problem. The moon's position has changed, and now the bottom of the part of the shed is in complete darkness. It's going to make part of the rescue almost impossible. What are we going to do? Cried Molly. Jimmy Jum was in deep thought. Stay here, Molly. I think I may have a solution. He turned around and ran off into the long grass. Molly waited anxiously for Jimmy Jum's return. Moments later he appeared, followed by a stream of fireflies, all with their lights out. I have the problem solved. The fireflies have volunteered to help us. Tell Captain Gruffy to get ready. I'll be back as quick as I can. Jimmy Jum and the fireflies quickly made their way to the shed and disappeared under the door. The fireflies gathered on top of some of the boxes. The plan was, as soon as they saw the first butterfly escape from its box, they would flood the bottom of the door with light. Jimmy Jum quickly slid out under the door and into the night. Captain Gruffy was waiting with his soldiers. Is it time? He called. Jimmy Jum replied, it is time. The fate of the butterflies is in your hands. Good luck, Captain. Gruffy and the first 10 soldiers disappeared quickly under the shed door. The rescue had begun. The rest of the soldiers made their way swiftly into the shed, where Captain Gruffy assigned 5 to each box. All that could be heard was the gnawing, scratching and tearing as the soldiers tirelessly worked to free the butterflies. Jimmy Jum stayed down on the floor with 10 soldiers who would finalize the escape. Molly waited outside to direct the butterflies up into the lilac tree. Jimmy Jum called the soldiers around and he said, "As soon as the butterflies start to escape from their boxes, they will make their way down beside us. We will then instruct them one at a time to lie flat on the ground, and when we surround each one and gently pull and push them under the door to freedom outside. We will continue this until they are all free." It was not too long before Captain Gruffy's voice could be heard shout, "The first one is free." Jimmy Jum turned to the fireflies and called, "Turn on the lights." The fireflies flew down and hovered over the soldier, flooding the bottom of the shed with light. The butterfly flew down to the floor where Jimmy Jum instructed her to lie flat on her side. The soldiers gently pulled and pushed her under the door until she was free. Molly flew down and told her to pull her up into the lilac tree. 1 down, 19 to go. A quiet cheer came from Jimmy Jum, the soldiers and the fireflies. Who would ever have believed that a tiny black ant, ferocious fire ants, and gentle fireflies could work together to bring other insects to freedom? Cooperation is always better than confrontation. Up on the table, Captain Gruffy and the soldiers worked tirelessly to tear holes in the cardboard boxes. It was very hard work. Would they have enough time to free all the captives? The moon was dancing and playing tag with the stars in the heavens, bringing ever-changing shadows and light onto the table. Their hard work was bringing success. More of the captives were escaping, making their way to the bottom of the door, where Jimmy Jum and the soldiers ushered them under the door and out to freedom. Molly sat anxiously watching the butterflies skirm from under the door to freedom. There at last, the vivid blue wings signaled Sango was free. She flew down and hugged her dear friend. Tears of happiness fell from their eyes. They both flew up into the lilac tree and waited for the final butterfly to be free. Captain Gruffy assigned more soldiers to go down and help Jimmy Jum on the floor. Through the window, Gruffy saw faint signs of light in the eastern sky. They must hurry, he thought. At long last they were down to the last box and suddenly were faced with a huge problem. The occupant of the box was a very large sword-tailed butterfly. They would need a very large hole to let her out. Captain Gruffy called more soldiers from down below to help. 10 soldiers ripped and tore at the box. At last they broke through as she sword-tail tried to squirm through the hole. She got stuck. Would they have time to free her? Furiously they ripped, clawed and tore at the box until the hole opened. Then all they took hold and slowly pulled the big sword-tail to freedom. Quickly she flew down to the door where Jimmy Jum instructed her on what to do. The soldiers started to gently push and pull her under the door when a cry was heard. "She is stuck. The opening is not big enough." They pulled her back inside. Captain Gruffy ordered every soldier to dig. Dirt began to fly everywhere. Some of the soldiers fell over from exhaustion. Others filled in until they felt the opening was big enough. Once more, the soldiers, including Jimmy Jum and Gruffy, started to pull and push the big butterfly under the door. At last she was free. Exhausted, she soared up into the tree beside Molly. Captain Gruffy and the fireflies were last to leave the shed. The brave group had completed the escape. They had been victorious over evil. Dawn was fast approaching. They had to leave before the evil one came out and saw what had happened. Molly observed Captain Gruffy standing by the big stone. He had a very concerned and worried look on his face. Molly flew down and landed beside Gruffy. "You do not look very happy. Is there something wrong? How can I help?" Gruffy replied in a low voice and worried tone, "My soldiers are exhausted, and I am concerned how am I going to get them back to the colony safely. It is a long way, and they won't be able to travel very fast, making them very, very vulnerable to predators." Molly thought for a moment and replied, "Captain Gruffy, I think I have an idea how to get them home safely. Wait here. I will be right back." With that being said, she flew up into the lilac tree where the other butterflies were resting. Soon she arrived back below, beaming with joy. "Captain Gruffy, your worries are over. I have a plan. We are going to fly the soldiers and yourself back to the colony. So I want you to organize your soldiers in groups. When that is done, the butterflies will land one at a time. You will direct so many soldiers up onto the back of each butterfly, according to the size of each one." Captain Gruffy's face lit up as he turned to his soldiers and started to give them the news. Molly supervised the butterflies. Jimmy Jum kept watch in the house. The plan went very smoothly, and soon the last of the butterflies fly down was the big swordtail, and that had taken so much hard work to win her freedom. "Captain Gruffy, I am so pleased and proud to be the one to take you and some of your soldiers back to your home and safety." Captain Gruffy was so emotional he could only say thanks. He wished Molly and Jimmy Jum good luck in their plan to punish the evil one. "You both are so brave." Molly called out to the butterflies and soldiers, "Hold tight, it is time to go home. Get ready, goodbye and good luck. Jimmy Jum and I have a quest to complete. We will see you back at the colony." With a sudden opening of wings, 20 butterflies and their passengers rose in a kaleidoscope of color and disappeared into the early morning sunshine. Molly and Jimmy Jum stood alone. Although they were physically and mentally exhausted, a great feeling of accomplishment engulfed them. They had, with the help of many others, succeeded in their quest to free 20 rare butterflies from the evil collector. The final drama was about to take place. Molly wondered how a small black ant was going to punish the evil one. But Jimmy Jum was brave, and she knew he always seemed to have a plan. Jimmy Jum climbed up onto Molly's back, and they fluttered up into the lilac tree. Jimmy Jum was very quiet, and Molly sensed he was thinking out his plan, and she knew it was going to be very, very dangerous. "Molly, I am going to sit up on the ledge above the door, and when the evil one emerges from the shed, he is going to be very angry after seeing all the butterflies have been freed. That is when I will jump onto his hat and punish him. Watch closely, and when I'm finished I will jump off. You can fly down to catch me before I hit the ground," Jimmy Jum said. Molly nodded and replied, "You can rely on me." Before she could say good luck, Jimmy Jum departed. The next time she saw him, he was sitting on top of the shed door. The waiting game had begun. Molly was very worried for his safety. An eerie silence fell around the shed. Jimmy Jum was hoping he would not have to wait too long. The longer the wait, the more nervous he would become, and what Jimmy Jum was about to attempt was going to be very dangerous. The sudden creaking and screeching of the rusty door hinge broke the silence and signaled the opening of the house door. A mumbling could be heard as the evil one stepped out into the morning sunshine. Raising his arms up to stretch, he revealed his sinister face. Most prominent was his large, crooked nose. Jimmy Jum looked at the nose, and the final part of his plan fell into place. He now knew exactly what he was going to do. The evil one stood there in his pajamas and an old tattered housecoat, and a battered pair of slippers hung to his feet. Mumbling to himself, he started to shuffle towards the shed. Suddenly he stopped and stood, staring at the shed. Was he sensing something was wrong? He quickened his steps towards the shed. Jimmy Jum retreated into the shadows. Stopping at the door, the evil one's bony fingers retrieved a key from his pocket. He quickly inserted it into the lock and turned the key. He turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. He reached for the light switch and turned them on. There was a silence. A look of utter astonishment and shock covered his face. On seeing the torn and empty boxes, he started to shout and scream. Who did this? Who did this? He began to kick and throw the empty boxes all over the shed, continually shouting and screaming, Who did this? Who did this? He turned and stormed out of the shed, but Jimmy Jum was ready. He jumped, landing on the evil one's hat, sliding down onto the brim. Quickly looking over the edge of the hat, he saw his target. He jumped and landed high on the nose, swiftly sliding down to the end. With all the strength he could gather, he bit the evil one once, twice, 3 times on the end of his nose. The evil one swatted at his nose, but Jimmy Jum was gone, flying through the air, calling for Molly. Molly, true to her word, flew down and glided under him, who landed safely on her back. She then flew up into the lilac tree. The evil one scurried to the house, shouting once again, Who did this? Oh my nose, oh my nose. He opened the door and disappeared inside, slamming the door so hard it shattered the window. He still could be heard shouting from within the house. Jimmy Jum, the brave tiny ant, and Princess Molly had triumphed and struck a mighty blow for goodness over evil. They both rested in the lilac tree for a short time, then heading back to the colony where everyone was waiting, hoping they were safe and uninjured. A loud cheer went up as Molly glided and landed in the middle of the circle. All those who had been involved in the rescue of the butterflies were there. The Queen, the soldiers, Gruffy, the Fireflies, and of course the freed butterflies. Molly, on behalf of the rescued butterflies, delivered a message of sincere thanks to all those who had taken part in the mission. She thanked the Queen for offering the services of Captain Gruffy and his soldiers, who had tirelessly worked through the night to make the escape possible. Molly continued by thanking the Fireflies for creating the light that was so badly needed to make the escape a success. She finished her speech with the following words, Goodness will always triumph over evil. It was now time to say goodbye. Molly spent a few moments with the Queen, who then left with her guards and returned to the colony. The rest of the assembly mingled, giving thanks and saying farewell and hoping someday they would meet again. The Fireflies were the first to leave, rising from the grass and vanishing in the morning sun. The butterflies left in 2s, 3s, flying off in all directions back to their homes, north, south, east and west. The sky was a rainbow of colour from their wings. The soldiers waved farewell to the butterflies and then marched off down the tunnel into the colony. Senga was the last butterfly to depart as she spent time with Molly, each promising they would soon visit again. Only 3 were left in the circle now, Molly, Jimmy Jum and Gruffy. Molly and Gruffy stood looking at each other, but nothing was said. Nothing had to be said. both knew their friendship would last forever. Jimmy Jum and Gruffy had proved that the dislike that both groups had for each other was easily overcome with friendship. They all said farewell. Captain Gruffy's last words were, "Cooperation always wins over confrontation." With that said, he turned and walked slowly to the tunnel entrance. He turned and waved and then was gone. Molly turned and looking at Jimmy Jum, she said, "We did it. You and I, with the help of others, we did it. The quest is over. So climb up, Jimmy Jum. It's time to go home." As they rode into the cloudless skies, they could be heard singing,
Here we go, to and fro, up in the sky and away we go.
The epilogue. The evil one could never forget what happened, and every time he looked into a mirror, he saw the 3 big bumps on his nose. He became so scared that maybe one moonlight night they would return. So he packed up his few belongings in a big cart and disappeared. Several weeks after the evil one vacated the house, a very strange phenomenon took place. It happened on a crisp fall day with a cloudless blue sky. A multicolored bolt of lightning burst from the heavens and raced towards the earth. It struck the evil one's house. A great ball of fire erupted, which consumed the house and the shed. When it was all over, all that remained was a fire and smoke-stained stone chimney that pointed up into the sky, a grim reminder of the evil that once was. At last, the evil one was gone forever, or was he?